Welcome to the Talk2Connect podcast. My name is Lisa Tallroth. I'm your host in all the Talk2Connect channels, which is a platform for return counselors across Europe. Today we'll focus on return counseling strategies. And today I'm joined by three guests. It's from the Swedish Migration Agency, Rojin Tutak, a return counselor. Hello, Rojin.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And I'm also joined by Signe Sondargaard, who is working for the Danish Refugee Council, an NGO. Welcome.
Thank you.
And my third guest is Joris Kennis, who's a senior expert on return and reintegration with a long experience from the Belgian agency Fedacil.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy that we got together like this, because that is really the purpose, to discuss our work from different angles and perspectives. And just to get you to know you a little bit better, Rojin, please tell us a little bit what your everyday work looks like.
Yeah, my name is Rojin, as you said. I'm working as a return counselor at the Swedish Migration Agency. So my work basically includes to handle different return cases where I meet people and have counseling sessions with them.
And Signe, what does your everyday look like?
I work in the DRC, the Danish Refugee Council, as a senior consultant. And here we have a team of both legal counselors and return counselors, providing impartial counseling to asylum seekers in Denmark. We are also part of the ERSO network, where we make available reintegration programs to asylum seekers who wish to return to the country of origin.
And Joris Kennis, you work as a consultant. What kind of tasks do you take on today?
Well, I work as a consultant on migration management and with the focus on return and reintegration as a part. I developed approaches and trainings, both in reception centers, where we develop kind of path towards information, path towards reintegration, but also in return desks, where of course you have a different type of counseling and also outreach activities. So for these three areas, we developed approaches and trainings.
And the idea for today is that we have designed a scenario that is, I think it will be easy to relate to anyone who works within counseling. And then I want to hear your thoughts on how to approach this situation. And the scenario goes like this. Let's imagine a family. We call them Mariam, Ahmed, and their 3 children. They have applied for asylum, but have now received their last decision from the highest court. They appealed, but the court finally decided that they have to leave and go back to Iraq, their country of origin. Mariam and Ahmed, they are both working, and 2 of the children goes to school and the youngest goes to preschool. The youngest child has a disability, but the rest of the family is healthy. And the family currently stays in a housing supported by the government. This is what you know so far, and today you will meet the family for the first time after their final decision. And when you meet them, you find out that the adults are upset and the children very quiet. And if I turn to you, Rojin, do you recognize this situation and how would you approach it?
Yes, it's very common, actually, more common than we think. This is a family whose last decision from the highest court has came, and they are probably also stressed and a bit upset. So what I would do, I would say that it is of great importance to actually identify what causes the stress that they have. Not until then we can really figure out what needs to be done and also in what direction we have to go with the family. So I would say that the techniques to use in these type of situations would be to not rush into things in order to get to the outcome as soon as possible. A family who's stressed and upset would most likely not be receptive to receive a lot of complicated information during the first counseling. So you have to warm it up a little bit. and we need to address the factors that are stressing them, and then we can gradually start responding to this after we have mapped it.
And what could a warm-up look like to you?
Just to be, yeah. So during this type of conversations, to warm up, I would say that I would let them to speak and to ask questions and how they feel about the situation and what their thoughts are, and let them to consider the situation that they are in right now. So not just to rush into my questions and start to inform what my role is and that they have to return as soon as possible, but to warm them up a little bit and get them to actually know what the possibilities are and what we can help each other in this type of in this journey, if I can say. So I would start to map that out.
And Signe Sondargaard, you work with the Danish Refugee Council. You recognize this scenario as well, I assume. How would you approach the situation in the first meeting?
I agree with a lot of what Rojin is saying. I think with this family, I would also, since they're in distress, I would also refrain from giving too much information. Often when you are emotionally upset, you're not really in a position to take in too much information. Rather, I would think that they would have a need to be listened to. So that would be my starting point. And I would offer a counseling process. This is what we do in the DRC if we have time for it. We don't only offer one counseling session, but we are available for as many sessions as possible that are needed. So I would definitely suggest a process for this family. And I will also engage with very much a person-centered approach, meaning that we don't really engage with one model fits all, but we work really person-centered. So we really try to put the specific individual in the center with his unique story and take a starting point for there. So the counseling would be open-ended. As I mentioned in many of these webinars, in DRC we work to support informed decision, not really to make people return, but to guide and provide counseling and information in order for them to make an informed decision on what they would do. But this is a process, of course.
No, I was thinking, what about the fact that you are not meeting one single person? It's a group of people in the room, 2 adults, 2 individuals, and then there are 3 children, 3 more individuals. How can that be approached?
Well, I think, of course, a main priority would be the children. If parents show up for counseling with their children, we always assess whether the child should be present during a counseling session. These counseling sessions, we often address difficult topics and sensitive issues, and the parents might have emotional reactions, and children often understands more than adults think they do. So we don't always leave it up to the parents to decide whether or not the child should be present in the counseling session, but we make an assessment as to whether the child should receive counseling together with the parents, depending on their maturity, of course, and the nature of the counseling session. But I think there are also some really basic principles to mention here that you really need to have as a foundation. This is not so operational. I know we need to talk about the case, but when you engage in counseling with families with children, then you really need to have as a starting point that children are first and foremost children. And they have their own rights, and they also really have the right to be involved and heard in matters that affect them. But this participation and involvement, that can be done in different ways. It can be direct, it can be indirect, but you really need to have to take in consideration their needs and the best interest, and have their perspective as the point of attention.
So, and I'm just thinking practically, would you split the group and ask to talk to each and everyone by themselves, or how can that be done?
No, not necessarily. We always respect the choice of the parents as well, but we will make sure to protect the children as well. We may I may invite another counselor down and, you know, sit with the children outside the counseling room. That could be done. So there are different solutions. But I think the important thing is that you really regard the children also as actors in the case. They're not just, you know, an appendix to their parents' case, but their needs really needs to be taken into considerations by talking to their parents about the children needs or involving the relevant stakeholders around the child.
Joris, do you have any thoughts on this? Yeah.
I found the starting point very valuable. In fact, my first thought was I give attention also to the room in which I give counseling. How does it look like? Is it something quite cozy, but it might be also a bit administrative? Why not? Give technology a place. Your computer screen has not to be between you and the migrant, for example. This is the first thing. So the space in which you do the counseling is important. Second, I should inform myself if this family already has got some minimal information before, because it's a final decision. They already had some steps and maybe some counseling, maybe done by others. And the third element is what do they expect? How do they look to me and my counseling? So to have this information.
How can that be found out? How they look upon you? How can you find out that?
I could simply ask it. I could simply ask it. If they understand why they are here and what they expect. And immediately, I should say, I understand their difficult feelings and stress. I find this also normal. It should not be normal if they have no signs of stress. So, and to give a bit space to that also, the despair, hope that was before, which now disappears. So, and I give some attention to that. On the other hand, there will be some minimal legal information that I have to give, that I have to explain. But this can follow. You can say, I have to explain things to you, but first check if they are ready to hear me.
Rojin?
Yeah, I just want to add, just as Signe and Joris said, it's, you know, to not underestimate actually the active listening and responsiveness and what influence it can have on the counseling to validate and to active listen is a crucial part in contact with stressed and upset people. So do not ignore these emotions, but to try to respond to them, and out of that, you know, set reasonable goals, and being transparent with the family, I believe, you know, is a step in the right direction. So yeah, I think it's very important.
What would be your way to respond or to react to their emotions? What can be said if someone's screaming at you that, you know, and are very upset?
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, you cannot respond to someone who's screaming with the same reaction. The tension is getting high, and there's very strong emotions in the room. So you need to understand and to emphasize with the person or the family in this case you have in front of you. You can also give them a choice to continue, to pause, or to move the conversation, connect, you know, with the goals of the returnee, and try to focus on the facts so that the emotions goes down a little bit. That's what I would do in these type of situations.
Yes, Signe?
Yeah, I think as is being said here, it's really important to acknowledge the emotions that is in the counseling room, and I think from some return counselors that are maybe by a legal profession or don't have a social worker background, it might be a challenge to actually deal with these emotions. and it may be stressful also for the counselor. But I think it's very important to acknowledge the emotions. And one thing that you can work with is a method called reflective listening. It's something that Rojin is also touching upon, but it's basically to really try to react and manage emotions professionally. So to build trust and demonstrate empathy by reflecting back their emotions. So that can show empathy just by reflecting it. So or just by mirroring what is being said. So this is a technique that you can use, and it makes it shows that you're really trying to listen to them, and it shows you're trying to understand their situation, and it shows that you are acknowledging their emotions. You don't need to really go beyond the fact of just mirroring what you're seeing happening in the room. You just have to say, I can see that you're feeling sad, full stop.
You don't have to value it.
Really effective.
But so I can hear all of you thinking that it's only so much we can accomplish in this first meeting, that this will take time. That's what I'm hearing you say. I mean, if you meet a person who is upset, or in this case a family, and time is often a crucial factor for counselors, a bit depending on where, for what organization and with what mission they are working. So is that what are you thinking about that? Do you feel that when you enter a situation that like this, that you are stressed, that you need to push this forward, or how do you go about? Who wants to go first? Joris.
Well, first of all, I think it depends on your organization. Maybe you are the person to blame for them, because you are in, for example, you're working for a federal agency, and they mix all up. They say, it's your decision that I have to go, and now you are my counselor. So this will be a conflicting factor emotionally. Second, I like very much the principles of motivational interviewing, what you explained, that you say open questions, reflective listening. It proves that you are in a position that you actively want to hear the voice of the migrant, and not only what is happening, but also what that means for him in his values. And I think this can be very stress reducing. And it can set up the scene right, because later on in your conversation, maybe something shall have to be said that are very in confrontation, and you understand? So I think as first step, as first approach, I think it's a very nice approach, on condition that you stay honest, because you shall have to do some messages that will be difficult also.
But do you recognize?
I think
Sorry, I interrupted you, Signe.
No, I think it's one approach in order to address all of the information that is needed, and to give the information, for instance, if time is limited, is also to really try to have an open conversation about all the strategies. And this is where I think an NGO can have an important role as well, because it's only, like, due to our mandates, it's easier to have an open conversation with an NGO who doesn't have the power to decide, doesn't have to reinforce any decisions. We are only there to talk. We don't have we don't have to do anything else. We don't have to make any decisions. We don't have to reinforce return or anything. So we can discuss all of the different strategies. And often this is a process that is needed before you can address the topic of return. So you need to address all of the different plans, and maybe talk about the pros and cons for each one. So with us, you can address, well, if you stay in the host country illegally, what would be positive about that, and what would be negative? And then gradually you can also ask, do you want to know, do you want to hear about the reintegration programs? Maybe this is an option as well that we can discuss if you like. Always with the approach of it being person-centered, so not to not to enforce information on a person if they're not ready for it.
But help the migrant to map their situation and the choices in a more neutral way. That's what I hear you describing.
Yeah, and acknowledging that it's not just a solution of staying or leaving. There are many different strategies in between. You know?
Rojin, you as working for SMA, the Swedish Migration Agency, you have a different task, right? You have a shorter time limit for your counseling. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it can. It's usually a challenge, you know, because some cases needs time, and you have to have several sessions, especially if there are families or if there's no, you know, if it's it can be a long process in some cases, and usually yeah, what the time is that you do not usually, you can give the time that you wished for during the counseling, and that can also be a challenge. But what I try to do is to be effective, you know, to try to set new goals for each section or each counseling, so that I can, you know, move forward. Because when we're stuck in a topic maybe, or in a question, then we cannot move forward, and it takes longer time. So I, as a counselor, I have to you know, acknowledge the aim of the counseling and try to gradually, you know, move forward with my counseling with the person I have in front of me, in order to make to make the process to go further. So yeah, it's a huge challenge actually, and we at the Swedish Migration Agency, we do handle several and many cases on a daily basis, and it can be difficult to have 100% focus on each and every case. So what we have to do in these situations is that we have to prioritize. That's the only option we actually do have when handling hundreds of cases, basically.
And how can that priority, what can it look like?
Well, a priority is, you know, you for those who do not know our routines, is that we send letters to the people who does have a deportation decision or removal decision, and based on that, who maybe they're contacting us and they want to leave, they are positive in leaving, or they have accepted their decision and they have a valid passport, you know, they have perhaps bought their own tickets. That's a priority for me. Then I can, you know, meet the person, I can have a conversation, and then we can start planning the trip or the return. But for those who have another attitude, a negative attitude towards returning back to their home country, it can take a much longer time, because perhaps their stakeholders at home won't help them to issue a passport, or to even accept them coming back home to their country. So yeah, it depends, but usually our priority is to focus on those who wants to return back.
What are your thoughts on that, Joris?
I have the first remark is the importance of choices. You can build in choices in your counseling itself, that you say, when do you want to have information and how, this kind of thing. But also, you know that choices make part of the decision making. Do you have choices? And I think that it's a bit the same also for government, federal organizations, as well as for NGOs. Offer choices and discuss all options. You can also, in a government environment, and for FEDASIL, it is really the truth, we can discuss all the options with the migrant. So not only return, but also the problems and the possibility of irregular stay, or new application, or go onward traveling. So offering choices is the first step, and it must be for the migrant in that situation. It can be a relief that he can run with you through all the choices. The second question is, what are the pros and the cons of each option? What is an advantage and what is the risk? And finally, the third is, how can we support And we have a different support when it's an option, for example, for return than for onward traveling. So choices, options, the pros and the cons, and the support are three elements for me in the counseling. Yeah, and
but does
the
it make
choice talk, yeah, it's the first step, I think, in the decision-making part. And you shall quickly have to give extra information to elicit the choice that can be made.
so?
So
Getting back to our Iraqi family that we are imagining, this first meeting, which will be a focus on listening to them, that's what I hear you say. What would be the next step, the next meeting? What will you plan, or how can you prepare for that? Do you have any thoughts on that? How do you go about, Rojin?
Well, depending on how the first counseling has been, if they are strongly negative or if they are, in the process of just accepting the decision, I need to, as I mentioned before, the questions are very important in these type of situations, because depending on what type of questions I am asking to the family, I can set new goals for the next counseling. I can identify what I need to prepare, or what type of questions I need to prepare for the next counseling in order to move forward gradually. So you cannot stuck, on the same subject. You have to, because the first time you meet the family, in this case, it's important that you bond with each other so that the family can feel trust. So I need for them to trust me in this process, and that I want to help them in this process. And it can be done through a little small talk, or that I show through my body language, words that I'm listening. And because in most cases they're out of balance, and if they don't feel that it's meaningful to continue the conversation at the first session, then we need to wrap it up during the second counseling. And then we need to I need to know basically if they are positive, or what their thoughts are. So it's difficult, actually. I just want to say that it's very difficult, and it is a process, as I have mentioned.
Because you feel that you need an answer from them quite early on. Towards what are we heading?
Yeah, exactly. Because also, as I mentioned before, it's a challenge to handle so many cases on a daily basis. And I need to know whether or not the family actually is in a step, or are in a step to start accepting their decision and start to collaborate with the migration agency. Because if the attitude will be the same through all counseling sessions, then as you think, I cannot move forward. I cannot force them. So I need to know early on that they are willing to start to cooperate. And based on that, I can, acknowledge my role, and I can start to help them.
Signe,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts for the second meeting with this family?
Yeah, I think I would have quite a different approach, actually. I would explore if the family would need access to independent legal counseling. That might be a first step. We have a team of independent legal counselors as well that we can refer to. So I would make a referral, and this is often an important step towards clarification as well, to get access to independent legal counseling. Because from our experience, we see return counseling as consisting of two elements, actually. Of course, it's not always that simple in reality. It's very intertwined, but it's often case clarification and then situation clarification. And often it would start with case clarification, and that's information and guidance on the rejection of the asylum application. And this often, as mentioned, may lead to referral to legal counseling to explore if there are other legal pathways to go. But what we see is that a lot of rejected asylum seekers feel completely detached from their own process. So you would need to spend some time on the case clarification, and a case clarification should lead to not agreement, but maybe acceptance of the legal situation they're in. And then it opens up for situation clarification. Then you can start a dialogue about, well, then what now? What should the future bring? And here we have the return counseling going through the different strategies, inviting for a dialogue to see where it leads.
Yeah, thank you. I'm thinking here, listening to both of you, knowing that you have slightly different tasks in this field, and I'm thinking, Joris, what are your thoughts on this? State agency working together with NGO.
Well, first of all, it depends on in what context your counseling takes place. Is it, for example, in a departure center, or is it in a reception center at the end of the procedure? Then you know time is limited. Or is it in a return desk where you know the migrant is coming there on his initiative? So it depends strongly on where is the counseling taking place and what's the time that we have. But we have to move on also, because you can stay in a status of empathy, but at the end you shall have to give some information and solutions have to be discussed. This is one thing. Second, the different role between NGOs and officials, yeah, it's an element. I think as NGO, you can say, for example, you come back when you are ready, or yeah, you can do so and leave the case a bit, which often is not the case in some departure centers.
That's true. We have the freedom not to, we don't have to make a decision about anything.
And
No.
often in return centers or reception centers or even at return desks, you have to do so.
Mm.
And
So,
you have to be,
yeah. So it can give a different approach.
Yeah, but it will, but does not mean that your let's say your adaptation to where the migrant is himself in his decision making. Try to adapt yourself. Try to keep always that connection. Try to. I think also some steps can be also announced to the migrant, that you say to him, next conversation, then we shall, for example, run to your options and take maybe a first decision. You can do so, or you can give him some homework to do, some things to think about, and to come with that to the second conversation.
Yeah, and Rojin, that's a bit like how you do it, right? Tell us.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I work with my cases to move forward, because I've mentioned it before to Lisa that I work with deadlines with my cases. So after I meet the person, and if I have identified that there is something that needs to be done here, and that I'm giving a homework, as you said, Joris, to the person, I work with deadlines. So based on what needs to be done, I do a following up after the deadline is set, and then I have another session or email conversation or even a phone call to know whether or not the homework has been done or not. So deadline is very important for us, and I think that it helps us as well to move forward with the cases that we are handling on a daily basis. Because based on that, we can map out if or whether or not the person or the returnee is willing to cooperate, or if it's just by words. So we have to know that they are taking active action in their situation and for the case.
Well, this is an ongoing conversation, and we are all learning from each other and from each other's perspectives. So I want to thank you so much for sharing with us your thoughts on how to approach the counseling task and this scenario we've been discussing. I guess this is not the time where we will find out whether they will actually proceed with leaving the European Union. This family, this is open, and that's open-ended. For now. But thank you so much for joining me today, Rojin Tutak, Return Counsellor at Swedish Migration Agency, Signe Sondargaard, Senior Consultant at Danish Refugee Council, and Joris Kennis, who's a Senior Expert on Return and Reintegration. Thank you so much for joining us today in this podcast, and look out for upcoming episodes of the Talk2Connect webcast and podcasts, and make sure you are on our sending list. You can always reach out to us, Talk2Connect at migrationsverket.se. My name is Lisa Tallroth. Bye for now.
This podcast is a production from the Swedish Migration Agency, produced with the financial assistance of the European Union and contracted by ICMPD through the Talk2Connect grant. And the content is the sole responsibility of the Swedish Migration Agency and not reflecting the position of the European Union or ICMPD.